Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Bridge to India's webinar on residential rooftop solar market. This is Neha McCall, and it is my privilege to introduce our panel to you. We are joined by a cross-section of stakeholders today. We have with us Mr. Anshuman Sharma, Vice President in Growth at SolarSquare Energy, Mr. Gaurav Keswani, Vice President in Residential Rooftop Solar from Amplus Solar, Mr. Shantanu Sirsath, Technical Head at Growatt New Energy. I welcome you all to today's discussion and thank you so much for taking out time and joining us today. Joining from Bridge to India is Mr. Mridul Chadda, Associate Director in Consulting, and he will be moderating today's discussion. I would like to thank our sponsor, Growatt New Energy. Thank you so much for supporting us and helping us bring quality content to our audience. Quickly on the format of the webinar, today's webinar will be an hour long and we will start with a brief presentation followed by the panel discussion. We will be taking questions towards the end, so do send in your questions through the chat box located on the bottom right corner of your webinar panel. Without spending any more time, I will hand it over to Mridul. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. I'll quickly lay some groundwork for the discussion we're going to have over the next 1 hour. So as you can see on the screens, the residential rooftop solar market has seen a sharp growth over the last 2 to 3 years, and the market has seen around 700 to 800 megawatt capacity added over the last 2 years. The market share in overall rooftop segment for residential solar used to be less than 20%, falling below 10% in 2020. But over the last 3 years, it has been stable around 30 to 35%. This is largely due to the efforts by MNRE to push for subsidies in the sector, the revamp of the subsidy scheme, the phase 2 MNRE scheme. But going forward, how the sector will pan out, how the growth will look like, what would be the growth engines, both in terms of consumer segments as well as geographically. We will dwell upon all these issues in our discussion. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen significant improvements in the policy environment. Most of these are largely in favor of a long-term growth outlook, but some have been negative as well. So the most important one is the launch of a national portal where consumers can submit their applications so that they needn't run around to different stakeholders for getting approvals. MNRE has also allowed the consumer to choose an installer of his or her choice instead of requiring consumers to go for only empaneled installers. The subsidy has been reduced. This happened, I think, only a few months back. Now there is an absolute number, absolute figure, which is available to consumers as compared to the percentage number of 40% or 25%. In the long run, we think this would be a positive, but as we will see during our discussion, this does have some short-term challenges as well. MNRE also made it mandatory for all net metering systems to use ALMM compliant modules. This, however, has been waived off until March 24. As I mentioned, there have been some minor negative developments as well. For example, states like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu have introduced grid charges, while some exemptions have been granted to residential systems, but there will still be some charges levied on residential rooftop systems. We have seen over the last few months some states coming up with reduced compensation for unused bank power as well. While we understand this is not a very major issue when it comes to residential rooftop systems, because the unused bank power may be less compared to corporate consumers, still it does create a dent in the financial attractiveness of the system slightly. So these are the key discussion points that will be covered over the next 1 hour. We'll start with an update from the panelists with respect to market status, the regional split, some technologies that have higher share uh, right now, and the average system size for both subsidized and unsubsidized systems. We'll also go through some recent policy developments and their impact in terms of implementation of the systems. We'll also talk about a very important aspect that is awareness among consumers and their preference with respect to technology, business model, financing, etc. We'll also talk about some emerging business and financing models. We have seen states like Kerala trying to experiment with new business models. So we'll cover that as well. In terms of technologies, we will go through modules, inverters, and finally we'll get a view from the panelists regarding the growth outlook in the sector. So to start with the discussion, I'll come to you, Gaurav. Just want to understand the basic market status at the moment. What kind of growth are you seeing? Are you seeing very well diversified growth in terms of geography? Is it coming from tier one cities, tier two, tier three cities? What kind of consumers are looking to set up systems?
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much the BTI team for organizing this webinar. I'm sure all of us are here know the inherent potential of residential solar, and we are just waiting for it to be tapped anytime soon. So if I talk about the market outlook, as rightly reported by the data shared by you earlier, there has been a significant increase in the consumer awareness over the past few months, or I would say since the inception of the national portal. However, it is still not growing as per what we expected to grow, because considering the market size that India is, the growth of this segment should be exponential. We are growing, but we should be growing at a much faster pace. And there are certain teething issues or certain new business concept issues that are there, which are being ironed out and solved as and when we go. And I'm sure my very well equipped colleague Anshuman will also agree, because he's also experiencing similar things in the market. Now, in terms of, if I say the category of consumers that we are getting, we are also surprised to see that there are 4 different types of consumer personas that come to us for getting these solar. The first one is, of course, a cost-driven consumer that is looking for to save money on their electricity, and they are heavily motivated by the subsidy impact as well. The second is the home improvement sort of a customer who are building new homes or upgrading new homes, and sort of like a very early network effect has kicked in, and they feel that if they are getting something done, solar should be part of their homes. The third is the aesthetic and the architectural network that comes to us, wherein they want to integrate solar panels as part of their homes into the aesthetic lifestyle, or make it a sustainable product that is part of their home instead of a product that is aiding their home's infrastructure only. And the fourth customer that we get are driven by sustainability or green causes, where they are more aware and they want to actually contribute to the environment. So this is typically the 4 categories of consumer personas that we have categorized as our eligible consumers. And just to add to that, the next question was on the split in terms of region. We've experienced a lot of demand coming from tier 2 cities, And one of the reasons why tier 2 cities is picking up on its demand because there the concept of individual houses is still a big thing there. And as in when we go to the tier 1 and metros, somehow the concept of apartments have started coming up more predominantly. And as and when the verticalness of a city grows, the overall penetration of residential solar goes a little down because dealing with apartments is a very lucrative business, but it comes with its own set of challenges and it is not categorized as a direct to customer, but more like a B2B service. So, did that answer your question?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Gaurav. Uh, Gaurav, could you also throw some light on the average system size that you are working on and the share of subsidized and unsubsidized systems that you
So,
install?
the average system size is somewhat ranging right now at about 55 to 60,000 rupees per kilowatt. That includes everything, and the average ticket size that we have is in the range of 3 to 5 kilowatts. And the most sellable SKU that we have is around 3.3 or 3.5 kilowatts with us. Now, in terms of split, our split has been roughly about 60% in subsidy sales and about 40% of our customers opt for non-subsidy based transactions.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Gaurav. Um, Anshuman, similar questions from you as well with respect to geographical spread of consumers, average ticket size, and share in subsidized and unsubsidized systems. What has been
That
your
has,
experience? Yeah.
so I think very similar to what Gaurav said, right? I think after the simplification of policies under the National DBT program, we have seen the contribution across multiple states increasing. So if you go back, and I was very interested in the chart that you presented, if you look at 2018 to 2019, right, Gujarat itself represented around 90% of India's residential solar, right? Over the last, I would say 12 to 18 months, there are other states which have made like a significant impact uh, in the whole program. States like Maharashtra, states like Uttar Pradesh have really jumped on the bandwagon and have started contributing more towards the national program towards solarizing our electricity grid. I think in terms of the demand split, uh, I would say there's a lot of patent demand that comes from tier two cities, right? For very obvious reasons, like Gaurav also talked about, that most of these places have houses built, right? And there's also the concept of building the house for the next generation, right? One of the things that we talk about at SolarSquare is investing in solar is very akin to our culture program where people would plant mango trees, which would reap benefits for the future generations as well. And I see there's a lot of demand that rise from that particular perspective. That the cost of electricity is rising very very rapidly, right? Just in Maharashtra, we've seen a 30% tariff hike in the last 1 year. Gujarat itself has seen a tariff hike, and we expect in 2014, 2015, a lot of other states will also follow suit. And that will again make solar as an investment even more viable through or just on economic terms. That being said, I think tier two cities have their own set of challenges, right? Where with correct government support, things can be simplified for these consumers who have a lot of demand, but do not have access to the best, you know, uh, what I would say is collection of options that they can consider, right? One of the most crucial aspects that we should look at, not just in terms of how much adoption that's happening in India, it's also about are we adopting the right products, right? We have seen countries like US, countries like Australia, which had this adoption pattern 3 4 years ahead of India's curve, but are now struggling with all these solar systems which are non-operatable, right? Solar systems generally give you an ROI in terms of break even in 4 to 5 years, but it's the rest 20 years where you're actually supposed to make good on your returns. Similar story has happened in Gujarat itself, right? Like I said, till around 12 to 18 months back, 90% of India's residential solar was just in the state of Gujarat. But if you look at the state of these solar systems today, a large percentage, I don't have the exact numbers out here, are massively underproducing what they are supposed to do. What will lead this to happen is, even as the network effects become stronger and stronger, we need to ensure that consumers' belief in solar as a concept doesn't degrade, right? So I think those are the options that tier 2 towns do not generally get, right? Coming to the average project size, I think it's very, very similar. I think pan-India average size, not just for SolarSquare, but across the industry is around 4 to 5 kilowatts, right? Which basically means a family living in a 2 to 3 BHK apartment, a house with 5 family members, probably have an AC, etc. Right? So that's been our observation in terms of how the adoption has gone by. In terms of the subsidy and non-subsidy split, more than 90% of our customers avail of now the national subsidy, simply because now it's available for every consumer in India, right? Other than a few states which are still primarily being driven through state subsidy, namely Gujarat, Telangana. Everybody else, I think the option of giving the customer to choose the installers has really simplified things for the end consumer, right? It has given them access to focus more on the quality of projects that they can pick up, and hence everybody has been availing solar subsidies. I think there's been a lot of promotion itself that has gone from the the central ministry, and I think one of the most crucial aspects has been that behind every policy, what's more important is the execution of that policy, right? We have generally seen there was a lot of skepticism when this policy came in terms of how would a central agency unify so many discoms with their own legacy systems, with their own IT platforms, every discom having a different process for people taking solar. I have been very pleasantly surprised and very, very happy with the pace of work that has happened in this integration and release of subsidies to the end consumer, right? So in that sense, I think there's also been that trust being built, that in terms of the subsidies coming, it getting stuck, those things have not happened. We have seen generally in a month since this program started 10 to 12 months ago. Today, around 300 homes are getting solarized every month, right? The subsidies are getting released. So I think tremendous potential being unlocked there. Certain, I wouldn't say we are there, of course, right? Certain things have to fall in place to make it even simpler for consumers to go solar. But we are on a cusp, right, of a very sharp growth in solar. The network effect is very, very dominant in small towns. When we started working on this industry, right, a lot of our focus was in just educating the customers and building their trust in solar as a product, right? In terms of whether solar will work, whether I'm investing so much amount of money into this product, would it give me the return on investment? I've seen a sharp increase in confidence in solar as a product. So when today consumers are looking at buying a solar product, they're not so much worried about whether this is the right product, whether this works or not. I think most of their worries are around what is the right product for me. And I think that is the journey that the industry will now focus on. Earlier, a lot of it was about educating the customers about this works, how does even net metering work. Today's consumers are very, very sharp, right? They have done enough research on Google, on YouTube. They avail of a lot of these webinars like the one that we have just organized, trying to educate themselves. So I think now the focus is going to be picking the right product, right? And I don't see today, every factor, there's a very strong tailwind to solar, right? Simplification of government policies, the economic benefits of solar increasing as the solar tariff is increasing, customer awareness is increasing. So yeah, I have a very strong positive outward towards what the industry is going through.
That's great to hear, Anshuman. Anshuman, both you and Gaurav mentioned strong demand coming from tier 2 cities. I want to understand the motivation behind this demand. Is it simply financial savings, or grid supply is also a major factor specifically for tier 2 or tier 3 cities?
I think if you were to talk about the genesis of the demand, right? India is India has always been a safety first approach to consumer dynamics, right? If you look at our FD rates, right? You look at the deposits in FD compared to other financial instruments. It's always been way ahead of what the Western democracies look at. The way I see it, the most of the demand is just coming from reducing the month-on-month disposable income being spread towards electricity as a product, right? One of the things with, you can see a lot of things. India has around 300 million households with televisions. If you look at the rise of even EVs in the two-wheeler segment, a lot of demand has actually come from the tier 2 towns, right? As the demand is increasing, as more people are using more electronic devices, uh, the percentage of disposable income that is getting spent in electricity is a significant 10 to 20% of their monthly income. I think that is the genesis of this as a product. Uh, and also the certain fact that it's a product which allows you to not worry about, uh, you know, reducing your lifestyle. As Indian households' disposable income has increased, as we have moved towards a more comfortable lifestyle. I think electricity demand increase is a very good indicator of where we are headed, right? A lot of pressure towards purchasing solar has come through that, and then again, right, there's a big incentive on going solar today. As the industry has matured, we had subsidies which started from large industrial towns, large industrial projects, right? And once it became a economic, it started making economic sense for everybody. The subsidies were generally reduced. So I think everybody has realized that everybody will have to go solar, and they should rather go solar today than tomorrow. I think there's a lot of, even for example, if you look at the, when we do educational content on YouTube, etc., most of the demographics which is consuming that content comes from these towns, right? Who are very, very curious, who now have avenues to learn about the impact of these things, who are more aware about government subsidies, etc. I think Gaurav can also chime in on this.
Gaurav, would you like to add something?
Yes, so very rightly said. I agree too about like on all pointers that Anshuman mentioned, and we're also receiving a very, very similar feedback. The thing that you mentioned about the grid supply, of course, there are challenges in terms of grid supply, but that is, I believe, not the base driver for that because a good portion of our customers already have backup solutions in place. They are not relying on solar power as a backup, and I believe in the last 1 year or 12 to 18 months, that education of how a solar plant works and it is not a backup source has actually been communicated very well effectively by a lot of stakeholders, and that education has now to an extent imparted. However, and one more driver that we feel and that we really bank upon is that we believe or we have seen the tier 2 cities, the populations are more close knit to each other, and the way of references and seeing what to do as a community has really grown or really prevalent in the tier 2 cities, wherein we have noticed that if we are able to capture one customer, that particular customer is introducing us to at least three other customers that he knows. So our average reference rate has been three in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, and surprisingly, in a city like Delhi or a metro, our reference rate is 0.7 to 0.8, which is surprisingly different because people here do not really believe in referencing that much, maybe for various reasons, but that's just the data that we have noticed. The second key aspect that I feel is driving the growth is that I think the community there are still very go-getters from their initial mindset, and whenever a new scheme is launched, they are the first ones who really benefit and take the best out of it. And I think the subsidy scheme is a very good driver and it is impacting the tier 2, tier 3 cities where they want a basic working product. Tier 1 usually shifts towards a more technically feasible product or a technically superior product or certain extra value adds that may be essential to them. But the product that is selling in the tier 2 segments are looking for value for money and a good deal to add out of, like to come out of it. So that has been our experience.
Very interesting points there, Gaurav. Shantanu, I come to you. Similar questions to you as well. Where are you seeing the growth coming from geographically, and also in terms of types of inverters that you are shipping out? So, grid connected, off grid, or hybrid, what kind of demand are you seeing across these three?
Yes, so definitely, as Mr. Anshuman and Gaurav has already said, initially everyone was just concentrating on Gujarat as a state when we are talking about the residential installations. But if you see for the past 2 years,
Shantanu, we are not able to hear you. Shantanu, we are not able to hear you. I think there are some technical difficulties. I think we'll come back to Shantanu. Anshuman, are you able to hear me?
Yeah. I think there's a lag at
Okay.
Shantanu's page, so if you can hear it,
Okay. We'll try to get back to him. So we'll
yeah.
move on to the next discussion point. You mentioned about the national portal. I want to understand how the launch of this national portal has changed the things in terms of implementation, on-ground implementation. Has it really made any difference with respect to the conversion cycles and uh, getting all the approvals on time?
Uh, so I think I'll break down that question in smaller modules, right? So first, let us look at it. What has the national portal solved for the end consumer, right? If you look at the process for availing government subsidies earlier, it was very dependent on regional discoms, right? The process was that MNRE would push the discoms to do their own tenders, right? There would be multiple companies who would bid for the tender based on technical feasibilities. Uh, then that tender would go under a long tendering process, after which some people will get empaneled. There'll be a large chunk of companies which will not get empaneled, right? And it led to a lot of confusion in terms of whether the subsidy is actually active in my place or not. What is the policy program? Who is an empaneled company? Who is not an empaneled company? What is the rate that has been determined by the government, right? So there was a lot of confusion in terms of a large chunk of the Indian population was not able to access this. If I were to take an example, for example, BESCOM, right, Karnataka, we had gone through the tendering process a couple of times. It was postponed, it was cancelled. Similar thing happened in Maharashtra as well, right? One of the simplest things, things that it solved for the end consumer was there was uniformity of awareness, communication, policies, subsidies for end consumer, right? So everybody came under the same umbrella, right? Everybody knew what exactly were they going to go for, what is the government policy around it, right? Therefore, the communication to the end customer became streamlined. Second thing, rather than focusing on the government defined rate for an end product, the consumer got access to choosing the best product for themselves, knowing that subsidy is a fixed amount, right? So I don't have to be defined by what is the subsidy rate in my particular market. I can pick and choose a product which feels right for me, and this is the subsidy amount that I will get, right? Third, a lot of companies could participate in this progress, because earlier, unlike a state tender program where there were multiple technical feasibilities that you had to go through, etc., right? MNRE defined one clear benchmark for anybody to get empaneled, right? So I firmly believe that the more competition that we have in a market, the consumer wins, right? They get better products, they get better prices for their choices, and that has just opened up the market a lot. If I look at it from the perspective of companies like us, EPCs, right? again, simplification of the whole process. It has enabled us to decide our own growth and expansion, which earlier was a lot, primarily defined by which DISCOM was more involved in this program. So it simplified that. The third part was, of course, the subsidy part. That was a liability for companies like us before, right? Just to clarify, let me clarify with an example. If your system size was, your cost of system was 2 lakh rupees and the subsidy was 50,000 rupees, right? The consumer would pay the company 1,50,000 rupees, right? And the companies would have to go through the whole process and chase the discoms to get their own, money back, which was a huge liability in terms of the working capital. Now the process becoming much simpler, the subsidy directly coming into the consumer's account, the working capital requirement for companies like us became much lesser, and it enabled us to run more efficiently and pass on all those benefits to the end consumer, right? So that was again a big benefit. The third benefit was it pushed a lot of discoms to simplify their own processes, right? We generally earlier in the discussion, we mentioned that the average project size all across India is around 3 to 5. If you look at an average Indian household, there's something which is called a sanction load, right? Which basically means when a house is being produced, what is the capacity of electricity intake that you have taken permission from the DISCOM? Generally, that number is 1 to 2 kilowatts, right? So earlier in the process, every DISCOM had different processes to get the sanction load increase. Somewhere it would take 30 to 60 days just for that particular process to happen, right? Through this program, a lot of DISCOMs have come together and have gone to streamline this whole process. A lot of paperwork has gotten reduced. Again, the lesser paperwork that we have, right, the more digital options that we advance, right, it reduces the cost of running a business, and that advantage can again be passed to the end consumer. So I think breaking it down, these have been the primary benefits of the National DBT program. And of course, like I said, the implementation of it has been really good, right? Initially, there were issues with the portal, etc. But the ministry was very, very quick to, act on all the feedback from companies, right? And implement very positive change. Today, a subsidy is credited to a customer's account within 30 days, right? I would say around more than 80% of this mail, the subsidy gets released in a beneficiary's account within 30 days, right? Which is a big, boon to, the consumers, where they don't have to worry about, that part getting stuck.
So, Anshuman, is the subsidy still being routed through the DISCOMs, or it is simply the central government transferring money to the consumer's account?
So the process, how it primarily poses, there's some verification checklist that happened to the DISCOMs, right? But the checklist has become much more slower, and the funds are directly transferred by MNRE to the beneficiary's bank account, right?
Okay. That is a great
One of the benefits is this is a very transparent process where the beneficiary himself can track the progress of his project, right? So earlier, because there was a lot of opacity in the whole program, and end consumer was dependent on the inputs that they were getting, right? Today, they can track it themselves online. The whole process is very fast, very transparent, and they can track it, right? And that has again become a factor in earning consumers' trust.
Right. Gaurav, I'll quickly come to you and then to Shantanu. Any experience that you could share regarding how implementation has been eased after the implementation of National Portal?
Well, I see. Our experience has been a little mixed when it comes to National Portal. First of all, the initiative is great, and the concept of it has been perfect, and it took us a lot of time and a lot of licensing to come up where it is. Something that we really fought for was the subsidy as a whole number instead of a percentage, because it really confused the consumers, because every state would have different tenders for their discovery of L1 tariff, and all the impaneled vendors were sort of like forced to uh, do projects in L1, and that tenders was open for 1.5 years, where the entire scheme of solar will be up and down multiple times. And even if we increase our prices because we wanted to deliver quality product, there were certain tussles that were happening in the previous model. But that has now been resolved where it is a whole number on a per kilowatt basis instead of something confusing as a percentage of the total cost, which may or may not mean anything more than that. However, the implementation of this scheme is coming with its own challenges where we are trying to go into the deeper discoms where they don't know much about solar, wherein just to get ourselves empaneled and really, teach the entire ecosystem of how the system works and how do you apply for feasibility, how do you grant the feasibility, what should be the checklist, etc., is something of a learning curve that the discom is going through right now. Then there are certain states that are still not, wholeheartedly accepting the national portal and still relying on the older formats of subsidy. And there is also an internal tussle that is happening whether to promote the state-sponsored subsidy or the central-sponsored subsidy. So I still believe that the execution is not yet done and execution is still going on. And it will still take some more time for it to be a worldwide phenomenon. The excellent part about this scheme is that how much they're investing in focusing on awareness. So, the purpose of this scheme is to create awareness about residential solar as a service in general and how it is good. So, I consider it is a very educative platform also that is investing a lot of time and energy into educating these customers. There are radio jingles that have started coming up, there are banners, and there are, advertisements going around by the ministry to promote this scheme. So that is overall helping this category to be created and accepted by the masses. And that is one of the best growth drivers that has led to this increase in sales. More than the subsidy part, I would say the awareness part has led to more growth. Of course, subsidy is just one of the hooks that, gives your time foundation to that decision-making process. But whether you have to take that decision or not is coming from some other sources. So all of those things are right and very well implemented and thought through. It's just that I wish the execution of it would be a little faster and not at the ministry level, but at actually the discom level. And at the discom level, the joint engineers that actually go and visit the sites and operate these portals, their education is still going around and it is taking some time to get them to a level where it can run like clockwork.
Very interesting points you raised, Gaurav. I was truly shocked that a developer or EPC would have to educate not only the consumer but the discom as well. So that is a double whammy for you guys.
I wouldn't say we are educating the discom members, familiarizing them with the new portal, because the competent people at the distribution companies are very well educated in that regard. Is that it is something new as a concept that has never been done
Right,
here.
right.
So people tend to get a little confused on how to go about it because like it came out all of a sudden 1.5 years ago. Now to expect the processes and systems to change overnight will not be possible. So even the discom has their own process to get themselves registered through the national portal, run their empanelment bids, get the vendors empaneled within the state. So all of that needs some sort of follow-ups and licensing within there. So that is what I meant by, hand-holding or teething and, licensing with the distribution company rather than educating them on how does the solar plant work.
Right, right. I meant capacity building remains an issue no matter uh, what you do, be it a residential rooftop system or even we have seen in open access as well, utility scale projects. wherein banking or signing agreements, getting the final commissioning certificate, etc. It takes a lot of time in some new states where open access has traditionally been very slow in going. Shantanu, I'll come to you now. You can complete your discussion points regarding market status and growth centers.
Yeah, so I think there was some technical glitch. So yes, as just to summarize, the states who are really doing very good in terms of residential, yes, Gujarat is the first state, and the second is Kerala, as I have already mentioned, is catching up very really fast, because I think most of the installations that are happening in the state of Kerala are more than 90% are the residential installations. But apart from that, Maharashtra, definitely Punjab, Rajasthan, and lately Uttar Pradesh is also gearing up for the residential installations. And when we're talking about the different inverters that are being considered, so yes, definitely string inverters are right now the most common inverters that are being used for the residential rooftops. But the research that we have done from the starting of this year, most of the customers are also very much inclined for the use of micro inverters. The same pattern that we have observed is for the European, Australian, and the US market also. And for that purpose, early this year, we have already launched the micro inverters. And the feedback that we have got from most of our customers, as well as distributors and end customers for that matter, everyone is very much interested in going with micro inverters, but till date, the main constraint that they are having is terms of pricing, because when we are comparing apple to apple, or a micro inverter directly with a string inverter, the costing doesn't still fit in comparison to string inverter for a micro inverter. But definitely we are trying to bridge that gap with the new micro inverter series that we are going to launch, so that the micro inverters can be very much affordable, as or maybe a little bit more expensive, or maybe at the same pricing of the that of string inverter, because the demand is definitely there. The customers do ask for that, but at the end, it's all a matter of pricing. If we are living around some niche customers who are very much for having their system with a micro inverter. But yes, definitely we are trying to bridge that particular gap with our new series of micro inverters that everyone would be able to witness during the ARIA exhibition, which is just next week. Apart from that, the inquiries that we do regularly get is for the hybrid inverters. Right now, definitely the pricing for the storage inverter is uh, very much high when we are comparing it with a normal string inverter. Regarding the policy, I'm not exactly sure, or I cannot comment on that, but still, I think hybrid inverters are not yet being mentioned anywhere when we are going for the net metering purpose. Apart from, I think, Bescom was there when they have mentioned hybrid inverters, and Kerala in Kerala for that matter. But apart from that, right now, hybrid inverters are not yet being considered for net metering. But definitely in near future, storage is going to play a very important role, because yes, as the co-panel Mr. Anshuman and Gauravji has already mentioned, the rising prices of electricity in this particular scenario, definitely the end customer will like to be completely grid independent. And in order to achieve that, storage is and will play a very important role. And for some of the states, we have seen there has been demand for this particular sort of inverter, that is the hybrid inverters with battery storage, which can play a part of on-grid as well as off-grid. but I think right now that market is very new, but definitely it will get matured in a year or two, where the demand will automatically change from on-grid inverters to your hybrid inverters. And I think all the manufacturers are already geared up and are available with these products. But yes, we are waiting for some sort of new tendering or some sort of new scheme from the government side, which will definitely help us to push this particular technology in the Indian market.
I think Tamil Nadu does offer some premium over the normal retail tariff if uh, the rooftop system is able to inject power during the evening peak hours. So some template may be available for other states as well. Shantanu, if you could quickly uh, throw some light on the current price delta for micro inverters over the normal string inverters, and by when do you see that delta going away?
Yes, if you are talking comparing the prices in comparison to string inverters, when we are comparing the micro inverters, definitely right now the price, uh, the conventional micro inverters that are available in the market right now, if you are considering a normal 1 kilowatt inverter, which is currently available in comparison to a micro inverter, the price difference is still around 2 to 2.5 times of a normal string inverter, which makes it a little bit very difficult for convincing the end customer to go with micro inverter. But as I have already mentioned, Growatt, as we are coming up with a new series for micro inverters, we are trying to bridge this gap more narrower. But I cannot comment right now on the pricing part or the delta that compared to our string inverters and the micro inverters. But it's a clear strategy from our management that definitely we need to bridge that gap, and we would try to be very competitive in terms of pricing for the micro inverter, because yes, it does have its sets of advantages, and it will definitely helps out the end customer in terms of generation part also. So let's see. I think we will get more clarity on the part of the pricing for our micro inverters once we launch this product during REI.
Sure. Thank you, Shantanu. Gaurav, I would like to now discuss about business models and financing of the system. So financing has been a major challenge for several years now. The government tried to push banks to provide financing, that didn't work. What kind of business models and financing options are you seeing now emerging in the market, or what kind of financing options would you like to see so that the growth is exponential in the coming years?
So, rightly mentioned, and I've been advocating about financing as one of the biggest roadblock in getting this thing started, as like one of the biggest challenges that we have faced. That unfortunately, there is not even a single good financing product that is available for residential rooftop solar. Now, there are discussions that are happening with the banks, and there are discussions happening at various levels of banks as well, wherein even World Bank is trying to launch a new residential solar focused credit line. SBI is working with them. Tata Cleantech is working on a financing product, and a lot of other good financing companies are trying to develop a good financing product that can be rolled out, and we are very patiently waiting for that. However, the current financing models that are available are through NBFCs, and they charge a tad bit higher rate of interest. and making the net of purchasing the solar plant a little bit more inconvenient for them. However, with the uh, availment of these NBFC financings, a lot of people who would not have gone for a solar plant system are now going. But those are still the interest rates, I believe, a tad bit higher that we would like to show to our customers that how much ROI you can expect coming out of this plant. So that is my aspect on the financing part of it. Now, there are different models that are going around, and there are pros and cons to all of them. Like Chandigarh started off this project, which is sort of like a PPA based rooftop solar scheme. Karnataka has a different financing model where they give you cashback or like set off the units under a PPA instead of giving you net metering. So there are different forms of settlement and financial business models that are going around in the market, and there are pros and cons to a lot of it. But like I primarily representing a developer company, I still feel that giving a PPA based tariff or a long term bet on a residential customer is still a little far away, and one of the reasons for that is there is a lot of risk inherent from a financing standpoint towards these residential solar customers. And secondly, we will not be able to raise attractive debts to refinance that particular project at this current stages. So that is why a lot of companies are going around, and I think almost everyone working in this space is primarily focused on one-time capex installments and then having a recurring revenue through AMCs, which is, I think, that has become the standard business model. Now, to overcome the upfront cost, a lot of people go partner with NBFCs that are available in the market to provide EMI facility to these customers so that we can show there is the customer can pay in equal installments over a period of time. But the real benefit will start kicking in if we can somehow structure the transaction in a way that their monthly savings from the solar plant can be more or less equated to the EMI that they are paying. That is when this model will come to fruition and the business will boom. So I think a lot of think tanks are on it to make it more commercially suitable and package it in a way that the consumers can actually understand that this is a win-win situation for them.
I think you mentioned a very important point, Gaurav. See, buying uh, any other appliance or a phone or a slightly costly appliance as well is somewhat easier. You understand the EMI concept, no cashback, and it's sort of easy to go online and do your research, and uh, just by the click of a button you can buy that appliance. But that hasn't come about in the rooftop systems. Anshuman, your thoughts with respect to financing, uh, how can we make financing uh, much more easier, the entire procurement buying experience of the consumer much more easier, so that the conversion cycle for you guys as well reduces significantly?
So, if you look at the growth of any industry, specifically solar, right, availability of credit has been one of the driving force for solar adoption, right? We talked about, the average size of an Indian solar system being 4 to 5 kilowatts. That means that they have to invest somewhere between 2 to 4 lakh rupees, right? And solar product today, again, something that we touched upon earlier, has a lot of demand which is coming from tier 2 towns, right? If you look at those households, right, there's very little expenditure that they do that turns into 2 to 4 lakh rupees, uh, you know, bracket. One of the problems, other than what Gaurav mentioned in terms of the interest rate, I think is also the spread of the whole product, right? If you look at the credit history availability in tier 2 towns, is very, very poor, right? A lot of people do not have a credible, credit history that people can rely on, right? A lot of people also do not have a very clear bankable source of income, right? A lot of their business or other income is still in cash, right? Which makes it even more difficult for anybody to extend the credit schemes to them. So I think one is interest rate. Second is also the coverage that comes for these two terms. When something that you talked about is the consumer durables product, right? If today anybody in, let's say, a small town in Bihar wants to buy a mobile phone, right? Credit is available to them just like that, right? One of the ways that it can be solved for is to look at solar in the same vein of a consumer durable product, right? And that will enable, much lesser thresholds for availing these schemes for everybody else. One of the most important things is, despite solar being a priority sector lending for all the banks, right, and hence every bank having a solar product, right, the threshold for any consumer availing that is very, very high, right? As we all know, banks provide a much lower rate of interest, but the threshold for going solar, for any consumer to avail that loan is very, very high. I think that is one piece that, the central bank, along with other banks, World Bank, has to solve for, right? Just like in other schemes that the government has launched, which has primarily focused on tier 2 middle towns, right? They have lowered the risk associated with solar. So some of the things like, is there a restructuring buyback aspect of solar which can further reduce the risk of NPAs, will go a long way in, just making this applicable for everyone. As Gaurav mentioned, right, the best case scenario for people going solar is to substitute their monthly bill with an EMI of similar amount, where the down payment becomes much, much lesser, the risk for an end customer becomes much, much lower, and hence, another cobweb reduced from their consideration set in terms of what are the risks associated with going solar. So I think primary question is of the applicability, what's the coverage of credit for these consumers, what are the options that these consumers have, right? Today there's just a handful of NBFCs which are working on this particular segment, right? We need more participation both from NBFCs and the banks to make it more accessible for the end customer.
Right. Very, very valid points, Anshuman. Hopefully, in the near future, we will see options wherein, like, people would book their e-scooters online. They would be able to buy a comprehensive solar rooftop system as well online. I think we are almost out of time. We do have a few questions from the attendees. One of them is, will the growth in the market continue to rely on subsidies going forward, given that one of the primary motivations is the economic savings? So, Gaurav, would you like to take that?
See, I think we have to understand how subsidies work. So, subsidy is a format or a tool by the government to make things more affordable and actually help get the volumes that are needed to generate the economies of scale uh, for a particular product or a service. And we have seen subsidies come in and go in different formats. Uh, within the solar network as well, where there were incentives for sort of first government buildings, education institutes, and a lot of waivers given in the open access network as well to promote that. But after that initial push, it is slowly reduced. Now, if we try and understand why the government wants to push residential solar a lot, is because considering the long-term perspective of DISCOM's health, if there are more residential solar installations coming in and residential consumers or domestic consumers get a tad bit subsidized tariff of electricity as well from the distribution company. So it is also in the long-term incentive for the distribution company that more and more domestic consumers adopt solar, and hence enhancing their power mix and power requirements. So I can see the subsidy being a growth driver in the near future. But like all subsidy schemes, after that initial growth is done, the subsidies will be slowly removed, slowly reduced, and then eventually removed. And the entire network effect would have been so powerful by then that subsidy won't be needed anymore.
Right. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time. I think most of the questions we covered during our discussion itself. Quickly to summarize, I think uh, the overall message that I got from the discussion was that things have improved significantly and are expected to improve even further, especially on the policy front, on the implementation part of the national portal. It was great to hear from you guys that consumer awareness has increased significantly, especially in the tier 2 cities, and the demand has been growing as we saw the trend over the last 2 to 3 years. But making residential rooftop systems even more attractive would take some more effort, I think, across all the stakeholders, be it consumers, discoms, or technology providers or developers and EPC providers. But the overall growth outlook remains very positive over the next few years. Over to you, Neha.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Mridul. It was an extremely interesting and engaging discussion. Thank you so much for taking out time and joining us today. I would also like to thank our sponsor, Growatt New Energy, for supporting our efforts. I would also like to thank our audience who were part of this webinar. We will be sharing the recording of today's webinar to your registered email account, and it will also be available on our website. We will meet you very soon in our next webinar. Until then, thank you and goodbye from all of us.